Hello.
Hello.
All
Good
right.
afternoon, everyone.
All right. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So we shall
Yeah,
wait for more people to join in before we start.
correct,
Mhm.
correct. Wait first. So to those who watch this live, you could share lah to other people as well, so that a lot of people benefit from this live talk. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And today's topic is pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty. Yeah, almost everybody in this world experience the feeling of the today's topic. Like almost everyone
Definitely.
have the experience of feeling these things.
Yeah. And in fact,
Mm,
it's one of the hardest things to
yeah,
deal with, actually. Yes.
correct.
So I would say these
Mm-mm.
emotions are like really hard-hitting emotions, regret
Correct,
and guilt.
correct,
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to
correct,
be talking about how
correct.
do we deal with this kind of like really
This
complex emotions. Yeah.
correct. Hi Manja, hi Haris, hi Lilin. Welcome to our live today. Boleh share lagi. We all can share this live so that we can benefit more people out there.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, we're gonna welcome more people in today. And yes, since these are like what you mentioned, right, Shari, it's like really
Mm,
it's a common experience for us.
correct.
All of us at some point would have experienced this kind of emotions like regret, guilt.
Yeah.
There's always an answer to it, lah. But when we ask questions like, what's one thing you regret in life? There would
Yeah.
be an answer to it. Yeah. But
Betul.
I think one of the persons who are able to say, oh, I don't regret anything, is definitely one of the people who have like, come to terms with a lot of things in life. And that's
Correct.
such a difficult thing to do.
Correct.
So, what about
Correct.
you, Shadi? If I were to ask you if there's anything in life that you have regretted, would you have an answer?
Oh, of course. I have lots of regrets in the past.
All right. Good to
Of
know
course.
that I'm
I
not
think
alone.
that would be a great question for me because so many regrets happens in the past, and then
Yeah,
yeah, to process it, it takes time. Like it takes time to process. Even though we in this field as well,
in,
right? It takes time for
indeed.
us to to process all these things.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
So just know that you guys are not alone actually, because yes, we as practitioners also we may seem like, oh, practitioners would have things figured out lah. They know how to deal with things kind of things. Yes, we
correct.
do know, and we are still learning. That's the main thing. But before we are mental health practitioners, we are humans first. So just like anyone
Mm,
else, we are also equally prone to experiencing these kind of difficult emotions like regret and guilt. For sure, we
yeah.
experience it also, and we are still learning on how to cope with it. And we'll be really glad to be able to share on how we have learned to cope with it so
Correct.
far. Yeah, so hopefully that will be
Yes.
beneficial for you guys.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct. Because if I could have known these informations earlier, so that I could process it earlier, then with this information, it's a bit, it's very beneficial for those who have regrets and guilt, the emotion that is still disturbing them until now. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
When it just comes to your mind, it's usually one of the hardest things to deal with, because talk about
Correct.
regrets and guilt, it's about things that has happened.
Yes,
And
yes,
we all
yeah.
know, as much as we all know
Mm-hmm.
this, we can't
Yeah,
change the past, but we can't stop
correct.
thinking about things like that, because, it means
Correct.
something to us, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely challenging things to deal with, definitely.
Absolutely. And we do have lots of issues related to regrets as well. Dealing with these emotions, absolutely, it's not easy. So that's
Mm-mm.
why we would like to bring in this topic today so that we could discuss more detail. And if you guys have questions related to regret and guilt, and then you can you can just ask us in the chats
Definitely.
in the chat lah. So
Mm-hmm.
we will try our best to answer the questions based on our knowledge and experience in this field lah, in processing this feeling.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also would like to invite you guys to share with us if you're comfortable with it, of course. If you're
Yeah.
comfortable in sharing, what are some of the things that you regret and
Correct.
you have regretted or still regretting perhaps, so you can let us know. So of course this
Yeah.
doesn't go with like us not talking about our regrets. So along the way we will share about our regrets as well.
Yes,
So see
yes,
if you guys can
yes,
relate with it.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Correct,
Mm-hmm.
correct, correct, correct.
So I
Okay.
think I'm just
Mm,
gonna pose two questions today for the audience and
mm,
see if they would like to share with me. So one of the main questions would be, what would be the biggest regret? And of course, if you are
mhm.
comfortable enough to share with it, feel free to comment. And
Yeah,
another
yeah.
question would be, what would be the most recent thing that you
Mm,
regretted? Yeah.
ah,
So
I
there you go.
see.
Two questions for you guys to think about, and if you're comfortable, do share with us. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
as we are gonna dive into this topic, we're gonna be touching on a few things like what are
Mm-hmm.
the common types of regrets we would usually have, and why we
Mm-hmm.
usually feel this sort of
Mm-hmm.
emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, we will also be touching on how do we cope with it, how do you process it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And how the regrets feeling affect us as individuals as well. We're gonna
Mm,
talk about that as well, right?
yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. So shall we jump straight into it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. That for those who is watching our live today, then you guys can share so that many people can see our live today.
Mm,
More lah.
yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
for sure.
So yeah, we can start
Okay,
now.
let's dive straight into it. So I'm gonna be touching on what are the most common types of regrets we have. So it
Mm-hmm.
has been categorized into four main types now. So I would like you guys to hear out these four types and
Mm-hmm.
see which one is the one that you're most familiar with, or if you have experienced all four types of regrets. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say I've experienced all four types. So yeah, so firstly when we talk about regrets, right, it's an emotion that is very complex because talking about regret, it means that you are aware of the responsibilities that was in your hands that maybe
Mm-hmm.
you didn't get to take. So now
Yeah.
that you realize that responsibility, and that's where you feel like, oh no, I should have
Yeah.
done things differently, that kind of thing. So yeah, when we talk about regrets, it always sounds something along the lines of like, if only I did this, or I wish
Yes.
I could
Yes.
have done
Yes.
it this
Yes.
way.
Yes.
So something
Yes.
along those lines, right? So really familiar things that all of us would have experienced. So one of the main types of regrets, and this is often when we are like much into the adulthood, middle adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
or I wouldn't say
Mm-hmm.
the younger people are exempted from feeling this way, but it's
Mm-hmm.
more common among adults, is that foundation regrets. So
Yeah.
this first type of regret is known as foundation regrets, and this
Mm-hmm.
usually involves big life decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look back, we tend to have feelings like, oh, I wish I had worked hard enough,
Mm-hmm.
or I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
put in the work. So this kind of regret usually stems from the feeling of us not feeling like we are not doing the work, or we had not done the necessary work to put us in a better life position, in a better state maybe, or maybe in a more stable life. So it revolves around big life decisions such as our studies, maybe the kind of academic pathway we would have chosen, or the career pathways we would have chosen.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. So
yes.
really big decisions that we had to take perhaps in a younger age, but
Mm-hmm.
now that we learn about ourselves more and we learn about life more through experiences, we can have doubts in us and asking ourselves like, oh, is this the right thing for me? And that can come with the regret of, oh, I could have maybe chosen a different pathway, or maybe I should have tried hard
Mm-hmm.
enough. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, much in late adulthood, there could be regrets of like, oh, I should have saved up enough.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
things like that. Yeah. So
Correct,
it's usually these
correct,
kind of
correct.
things. So any foundation regrets that comes to your mind, Shari?
Mm, yes, they will be usually related to the decisions in life, and we will like progress happen in life, and then we stay in a similar situations, and
Mm,
then that's usually happens to me lah. we wanted to make progress at the same, but we need to make a decision that is really discomforts, and then we avoid doing the discomfort things, and then end up that we are in the same loops, and then we regret of the big decision that we don't want to take, and then makes us feel regret with the decision, and then stay in the regret loops. So that's usually happened when I was in my university level, that oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. It's like missed opportunity lah. It's like, oh,
Mm.
I should have done. It's like, oh, if I've been given this opportunity, so that I can do it differently, something like that, so I could learn more, something like that. And as I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, that if I know more earlier about regrets, and then I could have done better in dealing with the regret itself. So this is one
Yeah, it's
of
a
the
regret of regret.
yes, yes. It's like something like this lah. It's happened to me a lot before lah. Yeah,
Indeed,
related to this
indeed.
foundation, regrets. And
Yeah.
usually regrets, to add on, regrets also align with mistakes we perceive as a mistake itself, so that will create regret feelings. So it's double regret feeling, because our perceptions towards our past experience as a mistake, so that when
Mm.
we perceive it as a mistake, and then that's actually create the regret feeling from inside. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. So that can look very different for everyone, right? Because like what
Yeah.
one person thinks as a mistake is not the same for
Yeah.
everyone else. So that's where
Correct. Correct.
our emotions can be very complicated and maybe hard to
Mm-hmm.
understand by others, because like what you think is a mistake may not be a mistake for someone. So it's
Yes.
very
Correct.
subjective in that way, which is why regret is a very personal
Yeah.
emotion where,
Mm-hmm.
one thing
Mm-hmm.
that you regret, uh, other people may not find this, may not share the
Correct.
similar emotions. But
Correct.
yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's a very personal experience, because in your
Mm-hmm.
eyes, these are the
Mm.
things that you feel like you could have done differently. So
Yes.
just
Yes.
because it's
Yes.
different from
Yes.
others, it doesn't mean that it's not a valid emotion to have. It is
Mm-hmm.
valid, and we can
Mm-hmm.
always make space for these kind of emotions, although they're very hard to deal with it.
Yeah.
Pushing them away, it's
Yeah.
not going to be helpful. It's about, if we try to process it, that's where we get to understand ourselves better. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So
Correct.
we touched on the first type of regret already, which is the
Regrets.
foundation regret,
The
right? So
foundation.
basically the big decisions in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So hard. It's really hard to be put in a position where you have to make big life decisions, but having to regret it is even harder.
Even
So
harder. Yeah.
yeah, because it
Yeah.
always comes with the thought that, oh, because it's something that has happened in the past, one thing you can't rewind, and another thing is like, that time that have passed, you can't get it back, which is what
Mm-hmm.
makes it even harder
Yeah.
for us to
Yeah.
cope with this kind of
Yeah.
regrets actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think as we were discussing about regrets earlier, you talked about missed opportunities as well,
Yes. Yes.
missing
Yes. Yes.
certain
Yeah.
opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a different name for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a different kind of regret. It's
Mm-hmm.
called the boldness regret. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
when we miss a certain opportunities, it underlying that missed opportunity is the fact that we did not take an action then,
And
in the sense that like we did not, or something hold us back lah, basically we did not
mm-hmm.
push
Mm-hmm.
ourselves to take that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
requires us to
Mm-hmm.
be bold, right? So in the
Yeah.
moments that it requires us to be bold, where
Mm-hmm.
we didn't do that, where we were not bold enough to
Yeah.
take those opportunities and stuff like that. So that is a different kind of
Yeah.
regret altogether. That is called
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
boldness regret. So this
Correct.
is
Correct.
again yet another
Mm-hmm.
common experience where we feel like, oh, for all the chances that we didn't take, for all the opportunities that we did not take, and in situations where we could have taken an action but we didn't do it
Mm-hmm.
because we were either too afraid to do that, we were
Mm-hmm.
inhibited
Mm-hmm.
by so many factors. But most of the time, right, when I think about it,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the most common underlying factor would be fear. And especially with the
Mm-hmm.
boldness
Mm-hmm.
regret. From the name also, it
Yes,
requires you to be
yes,
bold,
yes.
but we are not bold
Mm-hmm.
enough. So it can
Correct,
be a lot of
correct,
fear
correct.
involved.
Mm-mm,
Mm.
mm-mm. Usually, for this type of regrets, they have lots of questions. What if questions? For example, oh, if this thing happened, what if this is happened? That create fears in them, and then, yeah, they make a different decisions, and then later when they face the consequences, and then they started to, yeah, to think again that, oh, if I choose a different if I choose a different decision that time, and then I shouldn't have to face these things now. So that
Mm.
basically is also involve taking risk behavior for this type of regret, isn't it, Nani?
Definitely,
Mm-mm.
definitely. Yeah. It
Yeah,
involves taking risk, and that's the
yeah,
thing about taking risk, right? It's so frightening. It's
yeah.
so scary. What if it goes wrong?
Correct.
Again, what if questions?
Correct. What if? Yeah,
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 the main thing that
and
comes
we
up.
have a tendency to look at into the worst case scenario in every perspective we have. That is the most scary part when we have this this
Yes.
feeling, right? Yeah.
Definitely,
Mm.
definitely. And bonus point is when you have like a overthinking tendency. When you tend to
Yeah.
overthink, you will definitely think of
Yeah.
100 ways of how this can go wrong. And you'll think of the
Correct.
worst possible
Correct.
outcome.
Correct. Correct.
And
Correct.
that can
Correct.
stop us from
Mm.
taking actions. That can stop
Yes.
us from doing
Yes.
things that we actually want, but we always held ourselves back because we're afraid of
Yeah.
the consequences, maybe most of the time afraid
Mm-hmm.
of the negative consequences,
Correct,
what kind
correct.
of risk involved. We always,
Mm-hmm.
I think, at the end of the day, we look at what is at stake, right? Like, oh, what's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen if this happens? So, what is at stake? So, sometimes we are afraid of losing something,
Mm-hmm.
which is why we feel like, oh, I wouldn't want to lose that, so I better not take this step. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and few years down the road, when you look back, that's where it feels like, should I have taken that, regardless of the consequences? It's
Yeah.
usually this kind of regret is where we feel like, oh, if only we can have a rewind button in our life so that
Yes,
we
yes,
can go back and do
yes,
something
yes,
differently,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes it's comforting, to have this kind of thought. So if I could, if I could, yeah, do differently before, if I could do something different. And sometimes it's comforting to have this kind of thoughts. But
Mm.
actually, later we will regret because of we already confess with this thought. Sometimes it happens like in individual itself. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-mm.
It's interesting you pointed out that it could be
Mhm.
comforting when we think about those things. Like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying the alternative scenario, is it when we think about, oh, if I did this, this would have been the alternative scenario that would have
Mm,
happened. Is that
mm-hmm.
what you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, and sometimes we familiar ourselves with the thoughts of regrets. When we do this and then regrets, and we do that regrets, do that regret. Sometimes we already familiar with the thoughts of regrets itself. That's
Mm,
actually to yeah, it's okay for you actually to feel regrets itself.
mm,
Mm-mm, mm-mm,
okay. So yeah, indeed, like, once you're familiar with that feeling of regret, would
mm.
you say that once we are familiar, we would get comfortable with it?
Mm, it can be
Mm,
you feel comfortable with a regret, and also you might not feel comfortable with the regret. It depends on the situations, and also
mm,
sometimes it can be comfortable, sometimes it can be uncomfortable. So but the thing is that most of the regret feeling is not comfortable, but you don't really aware of it.
mm.
Most of you don't really aware of the regrets feeling, and then it tends to negatively lah, affect your functioning, affect your life
Mm.
lah. Mm. Mm.
Okay, okay.
Mm.
So I suppose in that sense, like, it can affect us in a different way for different people, depending
Yeah,
on how they view the
it
situation.
depends. Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends. Yeah, as
Yeah,
you
our views
mentioned
can be very
earlier.
different, right?
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, that regret is a personal thing, where you could feel something different with another person, lah, and it relates to these emotions. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And that's an excellent point that we brought up today, because I
Mm,
feel like when we talk about regrets, there is like a bit of a push for us to do things differently. But
correct.
then it always comes back to how we individually feel about that situation.
Correct.
Sometimes, if there is
Mm-hmm.
something that we can do about it and we feel the need to do something about it, then of course we
Mm-hmm.
can go ahead and do that. But not
Mm-hmm.
everyone would feel the same in their
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
given situation, you may not feel like, you would want to do something about it. You just would, um and you would just rather just deal with that difficult emotion of regret. You'll just ask yourself, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's just learn how to process this and deal with it and move on. Maybe there is
Mm-hmm.
nothing we have to do about it. So
Mm-hmm.
again, just know how complex this emotion is, and we are all, there's no right or wrong answers when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
dealing with regrets, or when it comes to making decisions in life that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes can make us regretful, or maybe sometimes it may cause us discomfort. So usually
Mm-hmm.
when we look at the things that make us regret, it's usually about the missed opportunities, the decisions, and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think when we consider what is at stake, so would you rather experience regret from not taking the chances, or would you rather take a more safer decision, so that
Mm-hmm.
you would not have to face any risks? So again, there's no right or wrong answer here. For some
Yeah.
people, taking the safer decision would be feasible for them, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
For some
Yeah.
people, they would be more willing to, they would be more willing to experience the risk rather than
Mm-hmm.
willing to experience the regret, because regret can be
Mm-hmm.
harder for them to experience, or
Mm-hmm.
even scarier. So it's
Mm-hmm.
about what you're willing to experience, the risk, the negative consequences, or the regret, right? So it's all personal choices. There's no right or wrong answer here.
Yeah.
But just
Yeah.
to let everyone know here today, to be informed about how complicated our emotions can be, and how it's a very personal experience. There's no right or wrong answers when it comes to the decisions that we make, as long
Yeah.
as it feels right,
Correct.
right to us.
Correct.
So
Correct.
talking about
Yeah.
what is right and wrong, right now, there's another kind of regret actually, that
Mm-hmm.
is known as moral regrets. So when we
Mm-hmm.
talk
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
morality, right, it
Mm-hmm.
always brings the
Mm-hmm.
question of what is right, what is
What is
wrong.
wrong?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Mm-mm.
again, very different answers. Some people would
Very
feel like,
little.
yeah,
Yeah.
would feel like one thing
Yeah.
is correct. For other people, that thing could be wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-mm.
that's where we can, moral regrets usually involve, us thinking about the times, or the things that we are not proud of looking back. The things in the
Mm-hmm.
past that we did, that when we look back now, we wouldn't be very proud of it. We feel like it was a
Mm-hmm.
mistake, it was wrong. Yeah, the same point
Yeah.
that you mentioned earlier, the perception of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like it was wrong of us, and we feel this kind of moral regret as well. Oh, I
Correct.
did that
Correct.
wrong thing. I shouldn't have done it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
correct, correct. It's more because when you share, when you talk, well, yeah, when you share about the moral thing, so what is right, what is wrong. So we all have a different common sense, lah. My common sense is not your common sense. Your common sense is not my common sense. But we have a tendency that to make it all everyone has a similar common sense, so that's actually
Yeah.
there are other things about moral rights. And when it comes to regrets, and when it's not um, it's like if it's against our common sense, and then we started to feel like we are doing some mistakes, and then
Mm-hmm.
when we do mistake, and then that is the regrets comes in, where, oh, I shouldn't have that, I shouldn't do that, or something like that. And then that's actually influence like when you have regrets, it's affect many things in your life. So when it comes to
Mm.
moral things, and then understanding the individual common sense also an important aspect in processing the regret itself. But that is about moral regrets lah. Basically it's more on how we judge or how we evaluate things happen in life, so that influence our feeling towards our evaluation towards certain things in life. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, and I think diving deeper into the moral regrets, here's
Mm-hmm.
exactly where we would usually feel the emotion of guilt as well.
Yes, 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 yes. Guilt and remorse comes in.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Really awful emotions also to feel, like awful in the sense
Yeah.
that, I'm not saying that they're not acceptable to feel. It's that
Mm-hmm.
it feels so, it can really weigh you down. It's like really
Yes,
heavy emotion when
yes,
you are
yes,
feeling
yes,
guilty.
yes, yeah.
When you're
It is
feeling
very
guilty and remorseful.
uncomfortable and unpleasant to feel this emotion, guilt and regret. So, because it makes us keep thinking about it, and then yeah, regrets of everything we do, and it's affects of our it affects many aspects of our life from these feelings.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's very uncomfortable to feel guilt and regret
Remorseful.
at the same
Yeah.
time, remorseful. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable to feel. Mm.
Mm, Because yes, this revolves around morals and what
Yeah.
we think it was wrong, and whatever we done that feels like it was wrong of us, and it shows that we are holding ourselves accountable
Mm.
now, and we are feeling that,
Mm.
oh, you know what, we always have like a self-talk, right? So we tell ourselves that, you know what, Nalini, that wasn't the right thing to do lah. You
Yeah,
shouldn't have
yeah,
done it.
correct. Yes,
So
yes,
I'm going to
yes,
be
yes.
really vulnerable today in sharing one of the things that one of the moral regrets that I have is
Mm.
that,
Mm.
back in school, I used to be like this, I would say a class clown. So I would
Mm-hmm.
usually, I enjoy making people laugh, but it's often
Mm-hmm.
at the expense of others, in the sense that making fun of people. So
Mm.
as a child, it would have felt like, oh, you're just like, making fun of your classmates and everyone would laugh about it. But
Uh-huh.
as I grow, that's where I realized, like, what if I'm like in the shoes of that person who is being made fun of? That would have been so awful. And it's something that I still feel guilty about, and something that I'm still
Mm.
holding myself accountable, because I believe that was a wrong thing of me to do
Mm.
back then. So
Mhm,
yeah, these
mhm.
kind of things that we would
Yeah.
tend to be, that we would tend to regret and feel guilty. But here's
Yeah.
where it also makes me realize what is making me feel guilty and remorseful now is that
Mhm.
now I realize those things were not right, and I am
Mhm.
taking responsibility for that wrongdoing. So
Mhm.
yeah, this
Mhm.
is why this shows
Mhm.
that we humans, and when we talk about feeling guilty and everything, when we're capable of feeling guilt, remorse, regret, it shows that we have conscience in us. It's like
Mhm.
a moral compass, right? It tells
Yeah.
you what's
Yeah.
right, what's wrong,
Yeah.
and that's where you are reflecting on your past actions, and we are also taking lessons from them in
Mhm.
telling ourselves, okay, this
Mhm.
was not right, next time
Yeah.
we shouldn't do things like this. So
Correct.
it's
Correct.
it's
Correct.
something that would guide us,
Mhm.
as uncomfortable as it is in experiencing this kind of emotions, but it guides through our
Mhm.
actions actually based on
Yeah.
what we believe is right and wrong.
Yes, correct, correct. It directs us to a certain level where we feel, oh, we realize we reach inside, or we reach a realization towards the situations happened in the past, which is, this is one of the good things about regrets, where it could bring something positive in your life as well.
Hmm.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
But we'll
Just
discuss
because
more
it's
detail
a
about it later lah.
for sure
About
how it
yeah,
can
yeah.
bring us more insights. Yeah,
Correct.
for sure.
Correct, correct,
Mm-hmm.
correct, correct, correct. That's about moral regret. I also have regrets in terms of moral, where yeah, for those who practice religion, something like that. So there are things that they cannot do, there are things that they do. So sometimes you, yeah, you you
Mm.
violate the rules of the religions. You violate the things that it makes you feel regret. So, yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes it happens many times, and that's actually also makes you feel regret constantly lah. Because when you fight with some religion, so there will be a moral guide in it, so that if you violate a certain rule, that's actually will create the regret feelings.
definitely.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I like that we are being really vulnerable today in sharing the things that we regret, and especially one of the
correct.
things like macam
Yeah,
it makes you have to mengaku, you have to admit that
yeah,
hey, this is something
yeah,
that
yeah.
was
It's not
wrong of me that I
easy.
did. It's not
Yeah,
easy, but we are
it's
vulnerable
not
and
easy.
we did it today. So props
Correct,
to us
correct,
for doing that.
correct.
And
Yeah,
also for
correct, correct.
whoever has been doing it in your life, sometimes we
Mm,
would admit that, okay, that was wrong of us to do. So each time you're doing that, that is something very powerful. And that also shows that now you have grown so much from that person in the past that who didn't know better
mm,
when whatever we did in the past,
mm,
we simply didn't know better. That's it. That's why mistakes happen. We all do mistakes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the fact that
yeah.
we realize it now shows that we have grown
Mhm.
so much from that person that we used to be.
Correct, correct,
Mm-hmm.
correct, correct. That's good to hear that we are. So
Yeah,
it's also a sign of growing, a sign of progress in our life.
definitely.
If you look back on the situations again, and then and then it brings some positive meanings to it as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's like what kind
that's
of
basically
meaning
about.
we are making
Yeah,
out of these
yeah, yeah.
experiences.
Correct, correct, correct. So that's about moral regrets in it.
Yep.
Okay. Mm-mm.
Yep. So that's the three types of regrets that we have covered. So
Mm-hmm.
now the last type of regret is
Mm-hmm.
connection regrets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from the
Mm-hmm.
meaning of it, it sounds like basically connections, right? The people that we
Mm-hmm.
connect with. So this is
Yeah.
more people related. And this is more of like the connections that we could have made, but we didn't make
Mm-hmm.
when there was
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
all the connections that we didn't build over time,
Mm-hmm.
for the people we may have
Mm-hmm.
lost along the way
Yeah.
from not building
Yeah.
connections. Oh, this is one
Yeah.
of the hardest hitting ones as well,
Yes.
right? When you think about
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Mm,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Oh, this one. Yeah, I do have experience having connection with it. Is a bit regrets for me. As you know, my dad passed away in 2018.
Mm,
So that, yeah, starting from that and until few years later, I feel very big regret of I could have done better. I should spending time with him more. I should this, I should that. Lots of that's the lingering thoughts in me lah. And until now, actually, it's still there are few thoughts that still lingering in my mind, and I'm still processing the regret itself. And it's not something like if you experience this thing, it's not something like you need to have a solution and get rid of the regrets straight away, because it takes time, and it's a things that is the feelings that need to be processed, and then once you fully process it, that's actually will help you to grow better. So my experience of this connection regrets would be with my father lah, which with my late father, where
mm,
I I could spend time more with him, and I could serve him better, something like that lah. Because my dad is very good guy. I
mm,
really yeah, I really respect him. I really look him like my role model in
mm,
life, and then I
mm,
lost the connection already. But when we look at in it, the regret feelings comes in where I feel I could spend time with him more, and I need to serve him more. I need to give him something lah more than I could have. That's
understand.
actually the regrets really related to the connection. But as we grow up, and then as we learn a lot about the emotions, and then it's processed better, like it's processed a lot in regards to this connection regrets feeling. Yeah. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so really hard-hitting emotions when you talk
Yeah.
about, especially like connection regrets. It
Yeah.
involves another person, and we are talking about opportunities that we really can't get back anymore, no matter
Mm.
how hard we try.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it's only so difficult to process. And
Mm. Mm.
I think as we talk about how to cope with this kind of emotions and how to
Mm.
process them in a better way, I think your sharing on how you specifically cope with this connection regret would be very valuable to whoever
Yeah.
is listening today. I believe a lot of people can resonate with those kind of
Yeah,
emotions,
correct.
because if I were
Mm-mm.
to ask myself what of these four types of regrets, what is the
Mm-hmm.
most hardest one to
Mm-hmm.
deal with? Personally, I feel like it's definitely connection regret and foundation regret as
Mm-hmm.
well, because
Mm-hmm.
these are the things that involves like it involves time and opportunities that is very hard
Yes,
to get back. You can't get
correct.
back those moments,
Correct,
and
correct,
it's so
correct,
hard to deal with
correct.
sometimes.
Yeah,
And
it's
we
very
tend
difficult.
to,
Mm-mm.
yeah, and
Mm-mm.
we tend to hyperfixate. We tend to ruminate over those things that we
Yeah.
really can't do anything about anymore. So really difficult. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really difficult to process when we look into this feeling deeper and deeper. Or it's connected with a lot of things, and then it's affected it is affect us in many ways, and also yeah, the way how we process it as well. It depends on the individual. So it's really difficult emotions to process lah, basically.
Mm.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So as we are talking about the difficulties in processing these emotions, it doesn't mean that
Mm.
it's not possible. It is
Correct.
possible, but we are acknowledging the difficulties in it as well, because we don't want to pretend that these things are, because it's possible, it's easy. You shouldn't feel the difficulties. Not at all. It's
Mm.
only understandable that these things are so difficult to manage and to cope. But of course, there is hope in knowing that we can definitely learn how to
Correct.
do this, and it's a lifelong journey in
Correct.
learning how
Correct.
we cope with things like this. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And we
Lovely. That's one questions. We have a one questions here
mm,
related to types of regret.
yeah.
Harris, he asked about if someone regretted for telling his or her sexual orientation to dishonest person. So what type of regret is this? Mm-mm.
Okay, so
Mm-mm.
what we pointed out earlier, the four types of regrets are the most common type, right? So it's not limited to just these four types.
Yes,
So
correct.
yeah, and these
Mm-hmm.
definitions is based off the things that involves the feeling of agency, feeling of
Yeah.
autonomy and responsibility
Mm.
over our own actions.
Yes,
But what you
yes, yes.
mentioned here is more of like, yes, it involves your action of of sharing about your personal information to
Mm-hmm.
someone where
Mm-hmm.
you may have felt like you could trust that person, but they turn out to be
Mm-hmm.
a dishonest person. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's where you can
Mm-hmm.
hold yourself accountable for doing the, in your eyes it wasn't right for
Yeah.
you to tell it to
Yeah.
this person because they were not honest, right?
Correct.
So I would say
Mm-hmm.
in a way it overlaps with the definition of moral regrets, because
Mm-hmm.
in your eyes it feels wrong that you had shared this with a dishonest
Yeah.
person. So just basing
Yeah.
off that definition, that's where I
Mm-hmm.
find overlaps with moral regrets, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
entirely just that. Like I mentioned, these four types are just the common
Yeah,
types,
the
and it's
common
not limited
one.
to it.
Yeah.
We've been
Yeah.
emphasizing a lot about how regrets
Mm.
and guilt, these emotions are super complex and they are not limited
Yeah.
to just these four types. These are four main categories, but
Mm.
it's not limited to
Yeah.
just this. So
Yeah.
regardless of the types, regardless of the specific type, I think you do get what is involved
Mm.
behind that emotion of regret,
Mm.
is that
Mm.
the emotion where you are holding yourself accountable, you are holding yourself responsible for your own actions. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
it's more emphasis on our actions rather than the other person's actions. Yeah.
Correct. 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 Because also difficult to categorize the regret itself, because it's also interconnected to each other. So between every regret, for example, regret, moral regrets and connection regrets is also connected. So
Could
that
be,
is a
yeah.
bi-directional relationship between these two. So that's actually needs a thorough explanation, next thorough exploration. So basically, so that you can understand fully of your own regrets, so that when you have a better understanding of your the whole regrets, and it's much easier for you to cope with it, because you have a good understanding of your own regrets itself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-mm.
Definitely, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So the key point is like in trying to understand that regret itself. So
Right.
I have
Mm-hmm.
one more point to add to this question earlier from
Mm-hmm.
Harris, is
Harris.
that
Mm-hmm.
is that like I mentioned, the emotion itself plays emphasis on the responsibility for your own action.
Yeah.
And from what you commented, it sounds a lot like you are holding yourself responsible for your action of disclosing something so personal to someone.
Yeah.
And while that action itself is, it's not necessarily wrong, maybe an error in judgment of who you can trust,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you deserve forgiveness from yourself in telling
Mm-hmm.
yourself that you again didn't know better in the
Yeah.
sense of like
Yeah.
who you could have
Yeah.
trusted. To be honest, no one knows until
Yeah.
we experience life and then we experience
Correct.
different people
Correct.
in our
Correct.
life. We just don't know. We can't expect ourselves to know and all the time who we can trust, right?
Yes.
so
Yes.
so I
Yes.
can see that
Yes.
this involves a bigger places or a bigger placement of responsibility on your side for
Mm-hmm.
your action of disclosing this information. But if
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot to do with the other person not earning your trust, you need to
Mm-hmm.
see this situation in a more objective way, that there is also another person involved here, and you can't it's
Mm-hmm.
unfair for you to hold yourself fully accountable for this situation.
Yeah.
So that's one
Yeah.
of the ways where we can actually cope with regrets,
Regret.
in trying to see things in a more objective way. When we hold ourselves accountable, is it 100% our fault? Sometimes
Yes.
yes, we
Yes.
contribute to a
Yes.
problem. It can be
Mm-hmm.
like a 50 or 60% of our fault, but we can't place the entire blame on ourselves.
Correct.
That's one of the ways
Correct.
to deal
Correct.
with it, to
Correct.
be
That's
honest.
one of the ways. Yeah, by looking at many factors that could influence the decision we made in the past. Yeah, could help
Yeah.
us processing the regrets feeling. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's basically about regrets, right? And Anani? The
Yes,
types
basically
of
the types.
regrets. So that why we shared with you about the types, so that it's much easier for you to understand your regrets feelings by having certain knowledge about the regret itself lah. Oh, regrets actually. Oh, this is a regret about foundation. This is bonus, moral,
Mm,
and many more actually. But this is more on common.
the
Types of
common one.
regrets, that yeah, so that you can easily understand your regrets feeling. Because the starting point of processing the emotion is understanding the emotions, so that when you understand, you more understand about the regret feelings, the more easier, much easier for you to deal with the emotions itself. Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So
All
the
right.
key is to understanding, right? So one of
Understand.
the key criteria in trying to understand something is that we
Mm-hmm.
need to have curiosity.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
where when we stay curious in trying to understand, that's where we ask ourselves the right questions to
Mm-hmm.
deepen our
Mm-hmm.
understanding of that
Yeah.
emotion, right?
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
happens with
Yeah.
regret is sometimes we because it involves holding us accountable for our actions, right? We can be
Mm-hmm.
very critical towards ourselves. We can be judgmental also towards
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand ourselves better, we keep blaming ourselves. That's the discomfort that
Mm-hmm.
comes with dealing with regrets, actually, because we
Yeah.
blame ourselves. We, in a way, punish ourselves also with the way we speak ourselves sometimes. And sometimes we also start viewing certain situations like, okay, I deserve that. That was karma.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. 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 Correct.
Yeah.
So that. Huh. it's a
So,
regrets lah.
mm, so the bottom line, I would say, to coping with regrets is self-forgiveness.
Mm.
I think that would be the first
Mhm.
thing. What do you think, Shadi?
Yeah. Yeah, first understanding, self-forgiveness, and then process the emotions thoroughly, which is involve understanding dan juga actions, so that and another thing is changing our perspective on the situations, taking perspective from other people as well could be a valuable exercise for you to process the regrets itself. uh, and a lot lah basically, but the most for me the most important things in processing the regret feeling is understanding the regret itself. By having a full understand of regret, it's really helps for a person to deal and process their emotions.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's from me lah. Basically.
Yeah, those are very helpful ways actually. So,
Mm,
what helps us to understand ourselves better is like a few things that you mentioned earlier. Trying
mm,
to process it. It can involve taking perspectives from others so that
yeah.
you understand your situation, your emotion better as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as mentioned earlier, I think it will be very valuable for whoever watched today's
Mm-hmm.
live, and
Mm-hmm.
if they
Mm-hmm.
can resonate with the connection regret that you shared earlier,
Okay.
do you mind sharing with one of the ways
Sure,
that you
sure,
use?
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. The things about regrets, when I experienced this connection regrets, and then it changed a lot of the way how I think, the way how I feel, and also the way how I put action on something, and my behavior lah, basically is affect a lot, and that's the consequences of these regrets. And I really understand that I resonate a lot. I ruminate a lot about the situations happened in the past where, yeah, the questions of what if I could have done better, what if I could have spent time more with my dad is keep lingering in my mind until I really understand the emotion itself. I really process the emotions. And how do I process it? By identify my that time I think that time I just only focusing on the thoughts itself, where okay, I should this, I should do that, I should have this, I should have done this, I should have done this. That is the common type of my pattern of thought, where I looking for a solution, where in the past I cannot go to the past and correct the behavior in the past. It's not a solution. That's actually when I understand, oh, it's not a solution for me to deal with this emotion. It's more on processing instead of providing or having a solution in the problems. So that to process it, I started to identify my emotions, or actually disease are, and to identify your emotions, I be honest to myself. I have a in the past I have a tendency that it's kind of denial kind of state.
Mm.
Happy in me, I kind of deny the emotions I feel, the mistake I do, something like that.
Yeah.
I kind of having this denial part of me lah. So that when I really identify the emotions, where oh, actually I feel regrets, I feel regrets of what I've been doing before. And then that time when I feel regret, I started to look at into, okay, but what makes me feel regrets? And then I asked myself, what makes me feel regrets? And then I started look for my mistakes. I started look for my mistake that happens in the past. What mistake I've done that
Mm.
makes me feel regrets. And then, but when I look the mistake that I've done, and then I got a few perspective, where this some perspective is negative, some perspective is not helpful, but some perspectives is quite rational to take in, so that for the perspective that not really helpful, where I think that I'm not a good son,
Mm.
I'm not a good members of the family are not helping much. That's the irrational thoughts of me lah that time.
Mm.
And then the rational part, oh, it's actually you become more, you value more people nowadays.
Mm.
You experience, for example, right now when I be with someone, I try my best to be valuable, and to see someone as valuable in my life, so that it's actually enhanced and makes me feel more enjoyable in connecting with people now, instead of before, where I take a bit much less valuable in life, like something like that. So but when I
Mm.
look about it, it gives me a lot of this big insight where I should value people around me more, and then enjoying my time with them. It's not looking at something good about them, and then be
Mm.
together with them. So that's actually
Yeah.
the perspective where change and help me to process the emotions of regrets. It relates to the connection regrets lah.
Yeah.
And this is
Correct.
part of it lah. I cannot share the whole
Understand.
process, but this is a part of me that could change my perspective towards my own regret lah. That happens in the past.
Right, right. That is very helpful, I would say,
Mm,
because
mm,
it's what I think the gist of it is that you, instead of looking at the action itself, that you feel like you could have done more,
mm,
and
mm.
yes, at some point it came with a lot of ruminating on those part,
Yeah.
right? But I
Mm-hmm.
believe
Mm-hmm.
after some point you moved into looking at what is this regret is trying to teach you, what is it trying to tell
Yeah.
you, and
Mm,
from
correct.
there, that's where you took away the lesson of like, I need to value people. I want to
Yes.
value people, and you're choosing to
Yeah.
do that more now. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
noticed that
Yes.
you let go of something that is no longer in your control anymore, which is that the fact that you
Mm.
can't go into past and do those things differently now. But what you
Yes.
can
Yes.
do now that's in your control is to choose to do things differently. So to
Correct.
help you to
Correct.
get ideas on like what I can do
Mm-hmm.
differently is to look at what is this experience is trying to teach you. What can you
Yeah.
take away from these
Yes.
lessons?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Correct.
yeah.
So,
So, mhm,
uh, yeah. And the circle of control here, I become more understand of the things that we can control, the things that we cannot control.
definitely.
Yeah, throughout this experience, if we don't really experience things like this in life, it makes us difficult to differentiate which one is in our control, which one is not in our control, which is much more
Very
difficult for
true.
us to process the emotions, right? So, so it gave me a lot of kind of positive lesson in life, where having this kind of experience taught me that I should value more people. I should know that it's good if I can value more people around me,
Yeah.
and also it makes me understand about the circle of control. So it's actually taught me a lot of positive outcomes
Mm,
or positive lesson in my life, which is
mm,
helped me to process the feeling of regrets.
indeed. And it gives you insights on how you can move forward and
Correct.
how you can do
Correct.
things differently. And
Correct.
that's a choice that you can consciously make hereafter. You know, it's
Yes.
always about
Yes.
what you can do next, right?
Ye-
That's where
Yes.
it's in your control. Then whatever decision you make now is something that's within your control. The past can't be
Yes.
undone. So I think main takeaway from today's topic is that understanding the fact that we regret a lot about things that have already
Mm-hmm.
happened, which
Yeah.
unfortunately we can't change. And yes, it is so difficult to cope with. It brings up a lot of heavy emotions.
Yeah.
So the key
Yeah.
thing here is allow yourself to feel them, those really heavy emotions. It's okay to
Yeah.
feel them. It tells us that
Mm-hmm.
we are capable of feeling those emotions because that's what
Correct.
we are humans.
Correct.
That's what we're supposed to do, is feel
Yes.
things.
Yes.
So
Yes.
just
Yes.
because it
Mm-hmm.
brings up a lot of discomfort in feeling them, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It can give us a lot of insights on how we can
Yeah.
do things better and
Yeah.
have more valuable experiences in
Yeah.
life. So to help us get to that point of like past rumination, yes, it comes with rumination
Mm-hmm.
for a bit. So how to help us past that is to look at asking ourselves this really key question like, okay, what is this
Mm-hmm.
teaching me? What is this
Yeah.
telling me? What can I do things differently next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is
Mm-hmm.
this regret
Yes.
trying to teach me, or what kind of lessons I can take away from that
Correct.
experience? And this
Correct.
is
Correct.
gonna come with forgiving yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
simply
Mm-hmm.
understanding the fact that we are humans, we are, we are not
Yeah.
perfect. We do make
Yeah.
mistakes. We
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
always have the best insight in all situations.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that has happened, it happened because that was the best thing within your knowledge and capabilities that you knew, and you had to take actions based on just that. And that was the best
Yes.
thing you could
Yes.
have done back then. And now that
Mm-hmm.
you feel differently and think differently, it shows that you have grown a lot from that past self.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't do things differently back then, and you
Yeah.
feel like, okay, there are things that you could have done differently,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that you can't do things differently this point onwards. So
Yeah.
taking lessons from that, and yeah, starting with forgiving yourself for whatever that has happened, acknowledging that mistakes are normal part of life, and it's okay
Yeah.
that it happens. It's about what
Mm-hmm.
lessons you're taking from them and how you can do things differently.
Yes.
And of course,
Yes.
trying our
Yes.
best not
Yes.
to repeat them. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's basically just giving ourselves the liberty in knowing that, yeah, I didn't know better back then, but now I do, and
Yeah,
that's what's
correct,
important.
correct,
Yeah.
correct, correct, correct. So previously we lack of informations, and then we lack of information and resources. Now you see that you know better, meaning that your knowledge is increasing, your resources increasing, so that by having this thing also makes you realize that you make some progress in life. So before this you don't know, now you know about it. And there's also about regrets, positive things about regrets. If you look at the perspective of when someone feel regrets, it's a sign of empathy capability.
Yeah.
Meaning that if you could feel, if you sense, if you feel regrets, essentially meaning you have the capability to understand a person, to understand the situations, to understand something, which is very important things in our important skills to deal with our problems. Empathy, meaning that if you look at the situation, and then if you could be empathize with that situations, actually that is a good thing for your emotional health. So is another sign of regret? It's not just about the mistake you have, but also the skills that that you have inside you, which is one of the skill that is still under the regret feeling is empathy skills, where is developed from the regret itself. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. And empathy is, in fact, one of the highest form of intelligence,
Mm,
actually, being able
mm,
to empathize. Because think about it, you're putting yourself in the shoes of others to be
yeah.
able to feel that. And
Mm,
you're putting yourself, you're actually moving past an experience that you would have had,
mm,
but you're able to empathize, shows that, that's a emotional intelligence, right? That we don't talk about
mm.
enough. When we talk about
Yeah,
intelligence,
we
it's
don't
always
do
about the,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's for like another
Mm-mm.
day to touch on, like, how empathy is a, high form of
Yeah.
intelligence. But
Yeah.
yes, that itself is a sign of growth. It's a sign of progress,
Correct.
that we have grown so much from the
Mm-hmm.
person that we used to be.
Yes.
So yeah, the
Yes.
fact that we're
Yes.
capable of feeling regret, guilt, it just shows that it's a sign of progress, of
Yes.
who we
Yes.
are
Yes.
as people, and that we are growing
Correct.
personally. So, and the
Correct.
growing doesn't
Correct.
have to stop.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
means that
Yes.
maybe it's going to take us experiencing more regrets for us to help us to continue growing.
Correct.
So
Correct.
just because it's
Correct.
uncomfortable, it's not a bad thing. It's just about
Yeah.
how
It's
you
not a.
can constantly learning how you can do things differently, what kind of lessons you can take
Mm-hmm.
away, and going
Mm-hmm.
forward, what would you do? And
Yeah.
also, I think one of the main things is also like, when it involves decisions, and especially like big life decisions, those kind of regrets that
Mm-hmm.
we tend to have.
Mm-hmm.
It's about going forward, with with main decisions that you have to take in life. you can always ask yourself the question of like, would I rather experience regret, or would I rather experience the risk involved in taking these decisions? So you can
Yeah,
try to
yeah.
weigh it out. And again, there's no right or wrong answers here. It's about what is feasible for you. And only
Correct,
you are
correct.
the best person to answer this question because it's your life. No one else
Yes,
can answer
yes,
it for you.
yes, yes, yes. And one more thing, what when it's relate to the feeling of regrets, and also you started to blame yourself, try to exercise yourself using the re-attribution technique, where look into various factors that could contribute to the result, to the outcomes that you are facing now. It's not just you the only person who contribute to the consequences that you are feeling now, but also there are many factors actually contribute to that. It's not you alone like making these things and then you feel regret. It because of my decision, it because of this. Yeah, if you have tendency to blame yourself, if you have tendency to look things 100% because of you, this is one of the cognitive distortion, where it actually didn't really help you to process the regrets well. But if you look at into using the re-attribution technique, where you look things happens because of various reasons, because of multiple reasons, this could makes you help process it better, because this happen is not just because of you, it's also other things that maybe you cannot control that things,
Mm,
and it's also influenced a lot in things happen in the past. So that's also help you to process the regret and keep
yeah.
feelings. Yeah,
For sure, for sure. Yes,
yeah.
I think that's a very helpful information also to, yeah, practice
Mm.
into looking things in a more objective way. Ask yourself, are you really the entire person to blame in this
Yeah,
situation? Because we
yeah.
get into that mode of blaming ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, holding yourself responsible is great, but when it turns into self-blaming, that's where it doesn't help you to move in a more constructive, in a more productive way. So
Yeah.
that's where asking
Mm-hmm.
yourself to really see the situation objectively. Are you really the only reason? Maybe you could play a huge part in that happening, in the
Mm-hmm.
outcome, but you
Yeah.
can't be the only reason. There's always a lot of
Yes.
factors involved, so try to look at those factors and
Correct.
yes,
Correct.
practice self-forgiveness and
Mm-mm.
always look into what you can do differently going forward.
Yeah.
That's the best we can do. That's the only thing in our control.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, that's it.
Mm,
And that time, if we look back in the past, actually, what you have done in the past, the decision you made in the past, that's actually the best decision you made.
you could
Because
have done,
with
yeah.
the yeah, because of the limited information, because of the limited resources, because of your age that time, because
Yeah.
of the situation that time, that would be the best decision that time. But if it's happened now, maybe it's a different decision for you. Maybe it's a different decision for you. But when we look at in the past experience, where it is the best decision that you made in the past, with your limited resources, with your limited situation, with your limited access to certain things. But
Mm,
now it's different, so that it could process you better, like in dealing with the regrets emotions. Yeah. Mm.
yeah. That is, yeah, our main takeaways for you guys for today in
Yeah.
helping you guys to
Yeah.
cope with these emotions of regrets and guilt. So we really hope this has been helpful for you guys. So of course,
Yeah.
this conversation doesn't have to stop here. If you have further questions, you can
For the
always let us
questions.
know. You can send
Yeah.
in your questions through our DMs. It's always open for you guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope you
Correct.
guys find it helpful,
Yes.
and we're looking forward to
Yes.
seeing you guys again on the next
Yes,
session.
yes. Yeah, we wanted to share more actually, but we also have a limited
Running out of time.
time to share.
Yeah,
Yeah, limited time to share
yeah,
with you. But it's okay. If you have any question, just ask in our Instagram. You can DM us and ask the questions that you have, and then we'll try our best to answer your questions. So that's all for today's sessions. Do you have
yep.
anything else to share, Dominic?
I think that's basically it. Just
Yeah,
again, reminder that we are not perfect, we make mistakes, and it's okay. So all of us
correct,
deserve self-forgiveness, mainly from
correct,
ourselves. Yeah, forgive yourselves
correct.
for whatever has happened. It's okay. And yeah, I've done a fair share of mistakes as well. I shared about my moral regret earlier.
Yeah,
So yes, and I'm
yeah,
still learning how to, continue forgiving myself. It's a lifelong journey. We don't have to be
yeah,
perfect right
yeah.
away. But what's
Correct,
important is
correct,
knowing that we all deserve forgiveness. So that's
correct,
my
correct,
closing
correct.
statement for today's
Yes,
session.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all from us today, and see you guys again in the next live sharing session.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a good day.